So what we're going to do today, we're going to use the same angle rules that we used in part 1, but instead of just describing the angle or telling me a number like this angle is 20 degrees or whatever, we're going to use it to set up equations and actually solve for x. So what we're going to do, remember our two main rules from yesterday. We learned that number 1, vertical angles are congruent. And number 2, linear pairs add up to 180. Now there are a couple other things you might see where like a right angle is 90 degrees, things like that. So remember all the rules, but these are our two main ones that we're going to focus on today. So I'm going to jump right in with a couple examples. And let's take this picture right here and solve for x. So what I have is I have that familiar picture from part 1 where you have two lines crossing, basically makes a big X. And I labeled the two angles. I'm going to add to the picture. This angle right here, instead of giving you a number, instead of telling you it's 22 degrees, I said it's negative 4x minus 1 degrees. And same thing for this angle over here. Instead of saying this angle is 50 degrees or whatever it is, I said this angle is 2x plus 7 degrees. But those are vertical angles, and vertical angles are congruent. So whatever I put there, whether it's a number or an expression or an equation or what, those two things are equal. So the way I'm going to set up this problem is I'm going to take one of the angles, negative 4x minus 1, and I'm going to say it has to be equal to the other one, 2x plus 7. And that's what I'm going to solve for x. So let's do that. So remember solving for x, we did a quick review on it. You've done a lot of it in the past. What I notice is I have a negative 4x on one side and a 2x on the other side. I want to cancel out one of them. Let me cancel out the negative 4x. So let's add 4x to both sides. Now remember our rules for solving equations. You guys can do whatever you want as long as you do the same thing to both sides of the equation. So I added 4x to both sides. I'm allowed to do that. The negative 4x and the positive 4x cancel out, and I get negative 1 equals, and then 2x plus 4x is 6x plus 7. Okay, my next step to solve for x, I probably want to get rid of the 7 next. So I'm going to, since it's a positive 7, I'm going to use a minus 7. And again, if I want to subtract 7, that's okay, as long as I do the same thing on both sides. So I do a minus 7 on both sides of the equation. The plus 7 and the minus 7 cancel. I'm adding here negative 1 and negative 7. When you combine two negative numbers, you actually add them. So I'm going to have negative 8 equals 6x. And I'm running out of space, so I'm going to move over here. Negative 8 equals 6x. And then we'll finish this question. If I want to finish solving for x, I need to get rid of the 6. So I'm going to divide both sides by 6. And x ends up equaling, so my answer is negative 8 over or divided by 6. Now that's not an even number. It's not like a nice whole number like 2 or 3. So you have two choices. You can either leave your answer as a fraction, or you can divide it on a calculator and give me a decimal. I'm going to leave mine as a fraction, but one thing I am going to do, since both those numbers are even, I'm going to reduce my fraction by dividing each one by 2. So first of all, my answer is negative because it was a negative divided by positive. And instead of 8 over 6, I'm going to call it 4 over 3. Because 8 divided by 4 is, or 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. So my reduced fraction answer for that one is x equals negative 4/3. Remember, you can get fractions or decimals for an answer. That's fine. That definitely happens. But the most important step was the very first thing we did. This right here, I'm going to circle in purple. You have to look at a picture and realize what you're being shown. I was being shown two angles that were equal. So I set those two things equal to each other, and then I solve for x. Now for our second example today, I'm going to give you the exact same picture and the exact same numbers, but with one tiny little difference. So what you guys notice is I took the 2x minus 7 and I took it here, and I just moved it to a different place. I moved it up here. In the last question, the 2x minus 7 was over there on the right, and now it's up there on top. So if you solve the question the same way, if you set this up by saying negative 4x minus 1 equals 2x plus 7, because a lot of people do that. They don't even think about the question. They just go, I see two things, I'm just going to set them equal and solve. You'll get the answer wrong because those angles are not equal. Those angles aren't vertical angles. The angles are a linear pair because we have the one line that's cut up into two angles. And the rule about linear pairs is that they add up to 180. So don't set them equal to each other. Instead, take the first one, which is negative 4x plus 1, negative 4x minus 1, and say, if I add that one to the second one, plus 2x plus 7, the answer will be 180. So I'm taking the first angle plus the second angle and saying, because they are a linear pair, if I add them together, they add up to 180. So that's the most important step for your work for today, the worksheet you guys are going to do today. Don't just automatically set things equal to each other and solve. Look at the question, figure out from the picture what you're being shown, and then set up the right equation to solve. Now once the equation is set up, the first thing I'm going to do before I start adding something to both sides, I have like terms. Let's combine them. So over here on the left-hand side of the equation, I have negative 4x plus 2x. That would be negative 2x. And I also have negative 1 plus 7. That would be positive 6. So what I have here, I added the negative 4x and the 2x to get the negative 2x. Then I added the negative 1 and the positive 7 to get the 6. So I haven't added anything to both sides of the equation yet. I was just what we call combining like terms. All right, so back to the problem. The next thing I want to get rid of is the 6. So let's subtract 6 from both sides. And we get negative 2x equals, and that would be 174. And then we'll finish this question out. I want to get rid of the negative 2 now, so I'm going to divide by negative 2. And for my final answer, it will definitely be negative. It's 174 divided by 2. It is going to be negative, but it's 174 divided by 2, which would be 87. So our final answer for that question is x equals negative 87. All right, so the idea when you're going through the work today, make sure you're looking at each picture carefully, each question carefully, and setting up the right equation to solve. Sometimes, like our first example today, two things are equal. You just set them equal and solve. Sometimes, like our second example, you add them together and make it equal to 180 and solve that equation. I mentioned earlier there's going to be at least 1 or 2 homework questions where you add them together and it adds up to 90 because maybe you see a right angle in there. So look at each question carefully, set up the right equation, and then solve it.